Genevas das is a term that's used a lot, and it's usually understood to be misleading people. To mislead somebody is genevas das. But as you'll see in the title of the shir, I've called it a stolen reputation, that one can steal not only inanimate objects and ideas. We know that one can steal intellectual property, one can also steal a reputation. And by stolen reputation, I don't mean you've stolen it from somebody, that you've taken it away from somebody. That's not the essence of geneva, as we'll see. The essence of geneva is you've got something that isn't yours. So to have a reputation that isn't really yours, and a reputation that isn't something that you've earned at all. And that's the idea of geneva stars, and that's why the word geneva is used. It's not just taught, it's used the phrase which we sometimes see, which is lahatot et habriyot, that you're not allowed to mislead people. That the word for that is lahatot, to cause them to make a mistake. Geneva stars is geneva, stealing something. And I've always been wondering this idea, why the word geneva is used with geneva stars. What are you stealing? What are you actually taking? And we'll see in our sugya exactly what that means. And when it comes to a reputation, the Soli Shupel, who was Shlomo ben Yitzchok Dov Halevi, Rabbi's grandfather, whose 20th Yortzeit is today, was a person in South Africa of enormous reputation. So you see, I mentioned that he used to say that I look in my microscope and I see God. He was a pathologist for part of his career. And he saw the Ribono Shel Olam in everything, and he was a professor in the medical school in South Africa, raised many generations of physicians. How did you study with him at all? Was he before your time? Did you study with Dr. Schiphol at all?
I studied in Cape Town.
Oh, you studied in Cape Town. And he had strong views on Orthodox shuls and community. He was a leader of communities in South Africa and an important figure. So we hope that we daven, that his neshama should have an aliyah. And Rabbi, we thank you for being part of this every single day and for your support. People don't realize how much it actually costs to distribute the shiurim. Just the distribution. It's quite interesting when we go into a bookshop, you don't expect a book for free. You're going to buy a book, you understand. The book has to be published, it has to be bound, it has to be transported, it has to be produced. People understand, but in today's world where stuff is available on the internet, people assume that free means it costs nothing. Free doesn't mean it costs nothing. Free means you're getting it for nothing. There's a big difference between it does cost nothing and you're getting it for nothing. These shiurim, leaving aside the time of preparation and delivery of the shiur, then I'm not even talking about that at all. Just the distribution of the shiur is not free. It does cost a lot, both in people's volunteered time and in professional time. So, Rabbi, you and the others who've supported us and do support us constantly, it means a lot. It enables a lot of limud Torah. Quite apart from your sharing your mastery of Seder Taurus with the Mishnah Yomis every morning, that's also been something amazing. The Pasuk says in Parshas Kedoshim, Lo tignovu, don't steal. Now we've told that many times in the Torah. Lo tignov is part of the Ten Commandments, but it's repeated in Kedoshim in the plural, Lo tignovu. And Reb Shimshon Raphael Hirsch says that this Lo tignovu in the plural doesn't mean don't steal in the normal sense of the word. It means Al tenahagu be'orma kedei lizakot b'yitaron shelo kadin. It means don't use deceitful means to achieve an advantage that is not legally yours. Beautiful definition of not just genevas das, but he says sha'arizu kol otzma shel hagneva b'muvana harachav yoter. That's really the definition of geneva. Geneva is using deceit to achieve an advantage, whether it's a financial advantage or a reputational advantage, that is shelo kadin, that is not proper. And the Tosefta goes so far as to say, Shivai ganavin, and there are 7 different levels of ganovim, of thieves. Harishon shebekulan, the first of all of them, where it all starts, is gonev da'at habriyot, as if a person steals his reputation. Shikola gonev da'at habriyot nikra ganav, and he proves from Avshalom in the Tanakh that genevas das, that stealing reputation, is considered geneva. The Tosefta says. Now we're taking a particular line, as within all the sugyot, particularly these complex ones, there are many, many different ways of going through the sugya. And today, very often the fashion is to say, here's the sugya, and here's the Rashba's approach, and here's the Ramban's approach, and here's the Rashba's approach. And it appears that the Rambam goes in a different approach. And then you've got all these different approaches in front of you, and that's one way of learning. But the way we learn within the Matmonim is where I select a particular approach and go through it consistently through the Rishonim and Achronim. Chaim. So today we'll learn a Ritvo and a Rosh Yosef and a Tiferes Yaakov. We're going through 14th century and 18th century and 19th century, learning the Sugya in a way which aligns with the Tosefta, that lo tignovu means genevas das, that stealing reputation is a Torah prohibition mentioned in the Torah and Parshas Kedoshim. And in our Gemara, we've got the case of a Sholeach Adam Yerech Lo'oved Kochavim Shegid HaNasher Betocha. You can send a thigh of an animal to a non-Jewish butcher, even though the Gid HaNasher is inside it. We're not afraid of it being resold to a Jew. Because it's quite clear, if it's a complete thigh, it's very clear that it hasn't been traded, as we call it. The Gid HaNasher has not been removed. If a Jew did buy it from the non-Jewish butcher, a supermarket in a regular city in America selling packaged meat with an OU on it or whatever, you look and you say, but this is a yerech. Does it still have a Gid HaNasher or not? If it's uncut, if there's no cut in it, it still has a Gid HaNasher, and that's clear. Says the Gemara, Shlema in chatucha lo. If it's cut, then you can't do that, because now you don't know, was it cut and the Gid HaNasher was removed, or was it cut and the Gid HaNasher is still in it? And the Gemara goes through discussing why that is, and the Gemara comes to a conclusion on our Daf Tzadi Dalet. We're learning Sunday's Daf today. V'yibayis ema, and if you want to, you can say, and Rashi adds, Taime de matnitin de mar chatucha lo. The reason that you can't sell or give a cut thigh to a non-Jewish butcher is lo lishade. Why? Im gera mishum dekol ganiv le'ledate, because there's dishonesty in it. That's an interesting idea. So I'm selling a thigh, a yerech, to a non-Jewish butcher who's marketed on non-Jewish people primarily, and I haven't taken out the Gid HaNasher. He's allowed to eat the Gid HaNasher. His customers are allowed to eat the Gid HaNasher. I'm still not allowed to do it because of genevas das. I've misled him. What does that mean, the genevas das? Says Rashi, De'ovid kechovim kasavur she Yisrael ze ohavo ma'od shetikna v'tarach ba litol gida ad shenir'et la'atzmo. An amazing Rashi. Because this non-Jew is really impressed with the Jewish supplier. He says, he didn't just sell me a yerech. He didn't just sell me a thigh. He knows I'm a non-Jew. He knows my customers are non-Jews. He could have just sold me the thigh. No, he traded it first. He took the Gid HaNasher out first. He made sure that what he was sending me was good enough for him. He wasn't just sending me something he can't eat. He was sending me something he could eat. And he was choosing not to eat it himself. He was choosing not to sell it himself to his clientele, but to send it to me, to give it to me. And then he gave it to me. He didn't keep it himself. If the Gid HaNasher isn't, I can say to myself, well, he didn't want to go to the trouble of taking out the Gid HaNasher, so he keeps the forequarters and he sells the hindquarters to me, and it's no big deal. But this isn't so. He actually did trade it. So this meat is now fit for his customers as well, and he gave it to me. And so he feels good about the Jew and feels indebted to the Jew for no good reason. Because the fact is, it wasn't traded. It just he made it look as if the Gid HaNasher was removed, but the Gid HaNasher wasn't removed. And that's called genevas das. V'omar Shmuel, back in the Gemara, Osu lignov dat habriyot. You're not allowed to steal a reputation from humanity. V'afilu dato shel oved kechovim. And that's even from idol worshippers. It doesn't matter who it is. This is not a law about Jews. This statement of Shmuel was not given, he didn't actually say it in a shiur. But by living with Shmuel, you saw that that's how he lived. The Shmuel ava b'mavro, because Shmuel was on a ferry once, crossing a river. Omer l'shameh, he said to his shamus, paiseh l'mevure. He said to the shamus, pay the driver of the ferry. Paiseh v'ikpid. So he did, he paid him, and Shmuel was upset with him. My time ikbid, why did he get upset? Omar Abaye tarnagole treif hava. He paid him with a treif chicken. The driver of the ferry was non-Jewish. Who cares if it's a treif chicken? But Shmuel was upset because there was genevas das. And he gave it to him as if it was a kosher one. Rova ma anpeko amar lashkuya. Rova said he told him to give him wine. Ashke chamra mezigo. And he gave him wine that was diluted. And even though it's no big deal, people have the diluted wine. And as we'll see, the value of the diluted wine was at least the value of the fare. He paid at least the fare, perhaps more. But in the mind of the ferry driver, he thought he was getting pure wine. And he wasn't. He was getting diluted wine. And Shmuel was very upset with him. From Shmuel's anger, we see that Shmuel holds that you can't be genevat, and why that's important. Comes the Ritvo. The Ritvo, it's interesting, as I told you, we were in Barcelona last month and hung out at the Rashbo Shul, and I thought to myself, the Rashbo sat there and learnt with the Ritvo. And with the Ra'or. The Ra'or learned there. The Ra'or was the Rebbe of the Ritvo. They learned in Barcelona, in that little square, that little area. It's a small Jewish area of Barcelona. And to think that that's where they walked, that's where they were, that's where they lived. The houses, the buildings are still the same. They haven't been changed. And the Ritvo was one of that group, of the Ramban's school of thinking. Vim Tomar, he asks, Mahu tzrach lavi Shmuel bezuda atanya la behedya b'matnita delekaman en mochrin nevelot trefot lenochri b'pnei shemat'ehu. Why do we have to bring this obscure case of the ferry? We've got cases in the Gemara just a little further on. We've got brises and cases where it says very clearly you can't mislead even a person who's not Jewish. And these are cases, these are parts of well-known Gemaras. You can't say that he didn't know, the Gemara didn't know that those brises. From the other cases, I might have thought that you're not allowed to mislead a person. In this case, we're talking about a non-Jewish person. Misleading a Jewish person, there are all sorts of other problems with. But misleading a non-Jewish person, I might have thought that's where he's paying. He's a customer. He's paying, expecting to get something for his money, and you're giving him something less. You're giving him something different. Still worth what he's paying. We're not talking about you stealing money from him. He pays $100. You're giving him an object of $100. But he thinks what he's bought is worth $120. And it isn't. That's what I would think from the other cases. Aval bedoron, but what happens if it's a gift? What happens if the non-Jew isn't entitled to it at all? You're just giving him a gift of the goodness of your heart. And you give him something that looks like more than it is. I might have thought if it's a non-Jewish person, that's okay. I'm giving this person an unsolicited gift. Does it matter if he thinks it's worth more than it really is? Come Shmuel to teach us, even in this case, it's not allowed. And some write in the name of the Baalei Tosfos that it's an Issa D'Oraisa, and the Ritvo brings the posuk that we learn from in Parshas Kedoshim, but you're not allowed to do that. So let's get it clear. We're now talking about, I give an unsolicited gift to a random non-Jewish person in the street, and I package it in such a way that he thinks it's more than it is. That's genevat, not allowed to do that. Why? Because he now feels indebted to me to a degree that is beyond what I've earned. That's genevat. I've stolen reputation. I now have a reputation with him that is worth more than it ought to have been. And the Rosh Yosef, the Rosh Yosef is the Prim HaGodim. We haven't used him enough in Chullin. Just a wonderful, wonderful sefer. Nowadays when the people learn halacha, they learn this is the Shulchan Aruch, and this is what the Magen Avraham says, and this is what the Taz says, and this is how the Mishnah Berurah paskins, and this is what the Shlomo Zalman says, and this is what the rabbi down the street says, and it's all kind of laid out as different views, and one doesn't realize who the Magen Avraham is, who the Taz was, who the Shach is in your Yudea. To understand them, the Prim HaGodim is a massive work explaining the Magen Avraham and the Taz and the Shach, just explaining them word by word what each word means. The Prim HaGodim was at one time he was just a teacher, and other times he was a Rosh Yeshiva. He was a posek in the 18th century. But it's not just the Prim HaGodim. So if you want to learn a Shach and Taz, if you want to learn a Magen Avraham in the Shulchan Aruch, you learn it with the Prim HaGodim. And you've got to work on a Prim HaGodim. A Prim HaGodim is not easy because he goes really deep. And the first publication of the Rosh Yosef comments that the Rosh Yosef, his sefer on Chullin, is kemo neshama leguf lesefer Prim HaGodim. It's like the neshama of the Prim HaGodim. So to try, you can't understand the Mogen Avrom without, let's go further. You can't understand the Mishnah Berurah without understanding the Mogen Avrom. You can't understand the Mogen Avrom if you haven't learned the Prim HaGodim. You can't understand the Prim HaGodim if you haven't learned the Rosh Yosef on Chullin. That's the way Torah is understood. One can know what they say, but you can't understand what they say. And this is like the neshama of the Prim HaGodim. And he asked, Vikashi de'akati mehanech brayta chimivi. He brings the Ritvo, and he says it's still difficult. You could still bring from. There are other cases where you could bring the same facts. Those are all talking about Jews, and I still might say that if it's a non-Jewish person to whom I don't owe that same level of exactitude, nevertheless, we're not allowed to do that. I might have thought that's because they pay money, but where do I know that even an unsolicited gift, even to somebody I have no association with, even to a non-Jew who's an idol worshipper, he has no connection with me whatever, and I give him a gift, and the gift appears to him to be worth more than it is, that's genevat. That's when we bring the proof from Shmuel. But you might say that Rashi and Rabbi Gershom are very clear that this was used to pay the fare. This was not a gift. Shmuel didn't say go and give a gift to the ferry driver. He said go and pay the fare. Where are we getting it from? Where does the Rosh Yosef get it from that it's a gift? Where does the Ritvo get it from that it's a gift? So the Tiferes Yaakov, another important sefer on Chullin. Tiferes Yaakov was a rov in Warsaw in the 19th century. And I mentioned to you that Rabbonim in those days used to deal with Gittin and with Kashrus, with Even Ha'ezer and with Yoredeya. And a lot of the Sforim they wrote were in those areas, including the Tiferes Yaakov. And he writes, it's very clear that Shmuel and the servant of Shmuel, the Shamus of Shmuel, knew what the fare was. And they were clearly going to pay the fare. There was no attempt here to give the ferry driver less than the fare. That, of course, he would never have done that. But the value of the fare was equivalent to a non-kosher chicken. We all know that, particularly those who live outside of Eretz Yisrael, that kosher chickens cost a whole lot more than non-kosher chickens. And people often question why it has to be and why there's so much of a difference. It's high-octane fuel. Nobody stands at the gas station and says, why is the high-octane fuel cost more than the regular fuel? Just because I've got a Ferrari, do I have to pay a higher price for fuel? Yes, you do. It's high-octane. You get a chicken that's kosher, it's high-octane fuel. And we need to do that. But the value of the fare of the ferry was the value of a treif chicken, not a kosher chicken. And so he could have got away with the treif chicken. And he had a treif chicken. And he gives him the treif chicken. So he's not doing him out of 1 cent. But the driver thinks this is a kosher chicken. He thinks this is high octane. Or he thinks this is unadulterated wine, and it isn't, even though the fare was the value of the adulterated one. The driver gets this kosher chicken and he thinks, a bonus. I really only should have got a treifa chicken. And he gives me a kosher chicken. That's amazing that he's willing to forego that. What a nice person this is. And really he isn't such a nice person. The chicken wasn't kosher, just he thought it was kosher. That's considered also genevat habriyos. One isn't allowed to do that. How careful we have to be, not only about theft in the normal sense, but any form of misleading, and not only misleading in a way that causes damage to somebody, even misleading somebody in a way that gives them benefit. There's no damage caused. On the contrary, they're given a gift. But if I land up getting, genevat is not about the damage I do to them. That's part of the chidush in the definition of genevat that we learned at the beginning, and that we see right through these shitos of the Rishonim and the Acharonim. The definition of genevat is not that I've taken from you. The definition of genevat is I've taken something which does not belong to me, something which I haven't earned. And that's not only an object, it's a reputation as well. If I take a reputation, if I give you an opinion of myself that is based on incorrect information, and I've therefore manipulated your opinion of me so that my reputation is enhanced in your mind, that too is considered genevat, and we're not permitted to do it.